My name is Elias, and I'm 41 years old. I've lived my entire life in the quiet town of Ashland, Oregon, a place where the mountains meet the sky and life feels simple. I thought I understood the world. I believed in logic, in reason, and in what I could see with my own eyes. I never imagined I'd find myself questioning everything I knew. But something happened to me, something I can barely put into words. A few weeks ago, I had an experience that changed the way I see reality, faith, and even the universe itself. You see, I always thought I was a good man. I worked hard, treated people kindly, and lived my life as best I could. Yet, deep down, there were questions I was too afraid to ask. And then it happened. I encountered someone, that shook me to my core. I asked a question that had lingered in the back of my mind since childhood. Are we alone in the universe? And the answer I received, well, it wasn't what I expected. What I learned isn't just about aliens or the mysteries of space. It's about faith, humanity, and the choices we make every day. This is my story. And it's one I have to share because it's not just about me. It's about all of us. I wasn't always the type of person to think deeply about the big questions. Life kept me too busy for that. I worked as a construction foreman, overseeing long days on job sites and juggling a demanding schedule. My wife, Elena, and I had been married for 15 years, and we were raising two boys who kept us on our toes. On the outside, it looked like I had it all together. But on the inside, I was crumbling. For years, I carried a heavy weight of guilt. It started with something small, a harsh word spoken in anger, a broken promise I didn't think mattered. But those moments piled up over time, and they started to shape me. I became quick to temper, distant from my family, and unwilling to confront the parts of myself that I knew needed to change. My relationship with Elena suffered the most. We'd drifted apart, exchanging pleasantries instead of meaningful conversations. She'd once been my best friend, the person I could tell anything. Now, we were like strangers sharing the same house. I blamed the stress of work, the pressure to provide. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was running from myself. Then there was my father. We hadn't spoken in years. Our relationship had always been strained, but after one final argument, one fueled by stubborn pride on both sides, we stopped talking altogether. I told myself it didn't matter, that I didn't need him. But every time I saw his number flash on my phone, I felt the pang of regret I didn't want to admit. The cracks in my life widened until they became too obvious to ignore. And yet, I kept pushing forward, avoiding the inevitable. It wasn't until the day of the accident that everything came crashing down. But I'll get to that part soon. What matters now is this. I wasn't ready for what was coming. Not even close. The day of the accident started like any other. It was a grey, drizzly morning, and I was already running late for work. My mind raced with deadlines, errands, and everything I had to do that day. I didn't see the truck coming until it was too late. The impact was violent. The sound of crunching metal and shattering glass filled my ears. Then everything went black. For a moment, it felt like I was suspended in a void. No sound, no light, just an overwhelming sense of stillness. Then, the silence broke. I heard a faint humming, almost like a vibration, that grew louder and louder until it felt like it was resonating through my entire being. My first thought was, am I dreaming? But the sensations were too vivid, too real. A wave of warmth and coldness alternated through my body. And then I realized I wasn't in my body anymore. I opened my eyes, or at least it felt like I did, and found myself in a place I can only describe as liminal. It wasn't light or dark. It was both, a shifting spectrum of colors and shadows that seemed alive. The ground beneath me wasn't solid. It rippled like water, but I didn't sink. I tried to speak, to call out, but no sound came from my mouth. That's when I noticed something ahead of me, a faint, glowing figure walking toward me. As it got closer, I realized it wasn't a person. It was a shape, constantly shifting, as though it couldn't decide what it wanted to be. A voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once, calm but commanding. "Elias," it said, "you are not where you think you are." Panic set in. What is this place? Where am I? I thought, though the words never left my lips. "You are in between," the voice said, "a place where all truths are revealed and no lies can hide." The space around me shifted. The rippling ground solidified, transforming into a long, endless corridor. Doors lined both sides, each one slightly ajar, leaking light or shadow into the hallway. The figure gestured for me to walk. As I moved forward, I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. Each door seemed to call to me, whispering my name, urging me to open it. I reached for the first one, unable to resist, and as I pushed it open, I was hit with a flood of memories. Moments I thought I'd forgotten. Moments I wanted to forget. I saw myself yelling at Elena, dismissing her concerns with a wave of my hand. I saw the look on my son's face when I broke my promise to attend his soccer game. I saw my father sitting alone in his living room, his phone in his hand, waiting for a call that never came. The pain was unbearable, but the figure urged me to continue. "You must see," it said. "You must understand." The next door opened to a scene I didn't recognize at first. It was a construction site, but something was off. The workers weren't people. They were shadows, moving mechanically without emotion. And then I saw myself among them, barking orders, consumed by my own frustration. "Your actions echo, Elias," the voice said. "Every decision, every word shapes the world around you. But you have been blind to the consequences." I wanted to argue, to defend myself, but deep down, I knew it was true. As I walked further down the corridor, the scenes grew darker. I saw moments of selfishness, pride, and cruelty, times when I could have chosen kindness, but didn't. The weight of it all pressed down on me until I could barely stand. "Why are you showing me this?" I finally managed to ask. "To prepare you," the voice replied. The corridor ended abruptly, opening into a vast open expanse. The sky was a swirling mix of gold and crimson, and the ground was a mosaic of glass-like shards that reflected my image back at me, fragmented and distorted. In the distance, I saw two gates, one radiating light, the other shrouded in shadow. As I approached, the air grew heavy. The light gate pulsed with warmth and a sense of peace, while the shadowed gate exuded a cold, magnetic pull. I felt drawn to both, but before I could take another step, a figure appeared between them. It wasn't the glowing shape from before. This figure was human, or, at least, it looked human. It was a man, dressed in a simple white robe, with eyes that seemed to see straight through me. "Elias," he said, his voice gentle yet firm. "You stand at a crossroads, but your journey is not over. There is one question you must ask, and the answer will determine your path." The question came to me unbidden, as though it had been waiting all along. Are we alone? Are there others out there? The man's expression softened, and he gestured to the gates. "The answer is not what you think," he said. "Come, and I will show you." Suddenly, the scene shifted again. I was no longer standing before the gates. I was floating in the vastness of space, surrounded by stars and galaxies that pulsed with life. I saw planets teeming with creatures I couldn't begin to describe, some terrifying, others beautiful, beyond words. "They exist," the man said, his voice echoing in the void. "But they are not what matters. What matters is the question behind the question. Why do you seek to know?" The realization hit me like a tidal wave. My whole life I'd sought answers to the mysteries of the universe, but I'd ignored the questions that truly mattered, the ones about love, forgiveness, and purpose. The man looked at me with a mix of sorrow and hope. "You have a choice, Elias. Will you continue to seek what lies beyond, or will you turn inward and face the truths you've long avoided?" Before I could answer, I was pulled back through the corridor, through the shifting colors and shapes, until I was once again in the void. The voice returned, softer now. "Your journey is not over. You have been given a chance to change. Use it wisely." And just like that, I woke up, gasping for air, back in the wreckage of my truck. But the world was no longer the same. Neither was I. I stood in the void once more, trembling from what I had seen. The corridor, the gates, the endless universe, it had all been overwhelming. But now, there was nothing but silence. It wasn't the comforting kind of silence, like a quiet evening at home. This silence was heavy, pressing against me, as if it carried the weight of my own guilt and shame. Then, I saw him. He didn't appear with blinding light or fanfare, as I might have expected. He was simply there, standing before me, wearing a robe so white it seemed to glow softly. His presence was undeniable, yet it wasn't intimidating. His eyes, I can't describe them fully. They held everything: kindness, sorrow, understanding, and a love so profound it made my knees buckle. "Elias," he said, his voice calm but penetrating, like it resonated within my very soul. "Do you know why you're here?" I shook my head, struggling to find words. My throat felt dry, and my chest ached with an unspoken burden. "You have lived your life searching for answers to questions that do not matter," he continued. "You've chased distractions, avoided the truth, and hardened your heart against those who love you. Do you understand the weight of what you've done?" Tears welled up in my eyes. I wanted to defend myself, to explain that I was just a man trying to get by, trying to keep everything together. But deep down, I knew there was no defense. I saw the moments of my life flash before me again. Every cruel word, every broken promise, every missed opportunity to love and forgive. "I've failed," I finally whispered. "I've failed everyone. My wife, my children, my father, even myself, and I didn't even realize it until now." He stepped closer, and the warmth of his presence washed over me. It wasn't a comforting warmth. It was purifying, like standing before a fire that reveals everything hidden in the shadows. "You have failed," he said, his words firm but not cruel. "But failure is not the end. It is the beginning, if you choose to see it that way." I fell to my knees, the weight of my guilt pressing down on me. "I'm so sorry," I sobbed, "for everything. I don't know how I let it get this far. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I see now how blind I was." He knelt before me, his hand outstretched. "Elias, you have carried the burden of your sins for too long. You have allowed pride, fear, and anger to rule your heart. But I did not come to condemn you. I came to show you the truth and to offer you a choice." His words struck something deep within me. "A choice?" I asked, looking up at him. "Yes," he said, his gaze unwavering. "You can carry this guilt and let it consume you, or you can lay it down and begin again. But understand this: forgiveness is not simply granted. It must be sought with a sincere heart and a willingness to change." "I don't know if I can," I admitted. "I don't know if I'm strong enough to make things right." "You don't have to be," he said, his voice gentle now. "You only have to be willing. Strength will come when you take the first step." For a moment, I hesitated. The enormity of my failures felt insurmountable, and the thought of facing those I had wronged filled me with fear. But then I felt it, something I hadn't felt in years: hope. "Will you help me?" I asked, my voice trembling. He smiled, a smile that carried the weight of eternity. "I am always here. But you must decide. Will you choose love? Will you choose forgiveness?" I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "Yes, I will." He stood, offering his hand to help me up. As I took it, a surge of warmth and light coursed through me. The void around us began to change, filling with a soft, golden light that seemed to emanate from him. "Remember this moment," he said. "Remember that love and forgiveness are choices you must make every day. And remember, Elias, that you are not alone. You never have been." The light grew brighter, enveloping everything around me. For a brief moment, I felt weightless, free from all the burdens I had carried for so long. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the light faded, and I found myself back in my body, lying on a hospital bed, gasping for air. The journey wasn't over, not by a long shot, but for the first time in my life, I felt ready to face it. When I opened my eyes in the hospital, the harsh fluorescent light seemed almost otherworldly. The steady beep of the heart monitor and the hum of distant voices grounded me in reality. But I knew I wasn't the same man who had left my truck that day. I had been given a second chance, not just to live, but to truly live. I couldn't waste it. The first person I saw was Elena. She sat beside my bed, her eyes red and swollen, clutching my hand like she was afraid to let go. For a moment, I just stared at her, overwhelmed by the love and concern etched on her face. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, my voice cracking. Her eyes widened, and tears spilled over. "You're awake," she said, her voice trembling. "You're alive." "I don't deserve you," I said, "but I promise from this moment on, I'm going to be the man you deserve, the husband you deserve. I love you, Elena. I always have, even when I forgot how to show it." She leaned forward, pressing her forehead to mine. "We'll figure it out together," she said, her voice steady despite the tears. That was the first step, but it wasn't the last. The day I was discharged, I asked Elena to drive me to my father's house. The thought of seeing him again terrified me, but I knew it was something I had to do. As we pulled into his driveway, my heart pounded. The last time I had been here, we'd exchanged words so harsh they had left scars on both of us. I knocked on the door, and when it opened, there he was. Older, frailer than I remembered, but unmistakably my father. He stared at me, his eyes filled with equal parts shock and hesitation. "I'm sorry," I said before he could speak. "I've been so stubborn, so selfish. I let my pride get in the way, and I've missed so many years with you because of it. I was wrong, Dad. I hope you can forgive me." For a moment he didn't say anything. Then his face softened, and he stepped forward, pulling me into an embrace. "I've missed you, son," he said. "We both made mistakes. Let's not waste any more time." Those words were like balm to a wound I didn't even realize had festered for so long. Over the weeks that followed, I began to repair other broken pieces of my life. I apologized to my children for the times I wasn't there for them, promising to do better. I started taking time to listen to Elena, to be present in ways I hadn't been for years. But it wasn't just about mending relationships. It was about mending myself. I began to pray again, not out of obligation or habit, but out of a genuine desire to connect with something greater than myself. I started going to church, not just as a passive attendee, but as someone eager to learn, to grow, to serve. There were still hard days, moments when my old habits and fears tried to creep back in. But every time I felt myself slipping, I remembered the man in the white robe, the warmth of his hand, and the words he spoke. Love and forgiveness are choices you must make every day. Those words became my mantra, guiding me as I rebuilt my life one step at a time. Now, as I sit here telling you my story, I want to leave you with this. Life is fragile. We spend so much time chasing things that don't matter, avoiding the truths that do. But it's never too late to change. It's never too late to choose love, to seek forgiveness, to find purpose. You don't have to wait for a near-death experience to start living the life you were meant to live. You don't have to carry the weight of your mistakes alone. Take the first step. Say the words you've been too afraid to say. Make the changes you've been too scared to make. You are not alone. You never have been. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Love, forgiveness, and redemption aren't just possible. They're waiting for you, if only you're willing to reach for them.